very good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us. So in this trial, they found that a 4-day work week resulted in job performance maintained in 4 days. Staff stress levels were lowered by a huge percentage. Work-life balance improved significantly, and there was a lot of productivity. This only makes sense. Why haven't we done this?
You'd be surprised to learn that a lot of companies are actually doing it. Flexibility and working flexibly and policies around lesser presence at the office but more productive hours are already underway and in place. But I think it's the thought process around it that needs to change, the perception of it. The fact that it's still frowned upon is completely bizarre as we approach the fourth industrial revolution in South Africa.
Totally. You find people who say, but what does that mean? It decreases productivity. A colleague of mine was saying that, you know, with such low unemployment rates, here we are, we want to have 4-day work weeks. Let's talk about productivity and actually define it. Just because you clock in at 7 and you clock out at 4 and you've been on YouTube the whole day does not mean you've been productive.
I completely agree. The notion of workplace presence is archaic. And it's one of the things that still set us back in South Africa from the global economy. When you look at the fourth industrial revolution, when you look at our role in the gig economy and the fact that workers, and we should be encouraging younger minds as they enter the workplace to look at other ways of gigging in the economy. Who's to say that I need to go and find myself a job that starts at 8 with a 1-hour lunch break and finishes at 5 or 6 and wait for my promotion and become a partner one day? Who's to say that that trajectory is the only one there is? Freelance work, work on demand, work via apps allows people to have more productive time without necessarily working a 9-hour day or a 40-hour week.
We have different generations within the workspace, some who are more hostile to the younger ones who are coming in because they're coming in with all these fresh new ideas and they've reimagined what the workspace is like. How can companies work at sort of bridging the gap there and creating that harmony to say, don't be intimidated, learn?
I think I read somewhere that this is the first time in workplace history where there are 5 generations working side by side in the same workplace. So you have your esteemed senior minds who've been there for years, and you've got these 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds coming in. And I think the idea would be to create think tanks, to hear their ideas, to try and encourage them to commit in a different way, a way different to what we would have done when we started out. Because that is the way to kind of create innovation, to kind of create relevance as well. Because these young minds are quite literally the future of that entity. And we should try and be inclusive rather than try and be exclusive, you know, to make them feel alienated and sidelined from what we see as the normal. Because I don't think that normal is going to exist for much longer. In the last, just before we closed for Christmas, I held disciplinary hearings where people were dialing in via a Zoom call or a Skype call.
For their disciplinary hearing?
The idea that we all have to sit in the same room and, you know, everybody sign a register, it doesn't exist anymore. But it's also not necessary. And I think it's that paradigm shift that we need to have as we approach the new year, because it also offers a huge benefit for women. As a woman, I can be a mom, I can hold down a career, and I can work a 45-hour work week. Hell, I could work a 52-hour work week if I really want to. But I don't have to choose between any of those capacities, because technology allows me to be everything I choose to be in those hours without having to sit in an office to do it.
Then you find leaders who say, but we have to see you here on that desk. That for me is comforting to see that the personnel is here and that means they're doing something. How do we even begin to is there training that is needed for managers, for leaders to sort of think about reinventing the workspace so you get the best out of your people? It's not machines that make the place, it's the human capital.
And I think that's where employment law comes in, because at our common law, employees carry fiduciary duties. So that is the duty to devote the whole of your time to act in the best interests of your employer. It's the duty of subordination. And those duties are perceived to be honored if I'm sitting at my desk before you come in and I leave after you leave. The problem we have with that is now at odds with where the economy, the global economy, is heading.
Yeah.
And what we need to understand is if we allow people flexibility, we get more productive time out of them. Because they are more likely to put their computers on at 8:30 a.m. after their kids have gone to bed or they've had a shower and had something to eat than they are if they've worked a 7-8 hour day, consecutive hours, stressful meeting to meeting, and then get home and they're like, the last thing I actually want to do is see that laptop right now. It encourages goodwill and it encourages more productive time. And there's a distinction between working hours and productive time. And also, it allows us to be more efficient as our tax base is shrinking. The more people that work more productively, the bigger our tax base becomes, the more able we are to afford to fund the things that need the funding, the social grants that we so desperately need funding for the people in need in our country. So to my mind, there's all kinds of benefits to this thing. I think the problem is, though, at what level is it that we implement it? Because it can't, we are a mining country, we are a manufacturing country. Your people work shifts, they need those overtime hours. So how far down the office space do we put this kind of flexible working hours thing?
In the same breath, when we speak about employers, we need to speak about employees. You do find people who take chances. You do find people who are just lazy. I'm here to collect a check and that is it. I'm not going to put anything into it. Also, how do we then mitigate against that? Is there any way?
Checks and balances. You know, we have key performance indicators. Many of us sign job descriptions, performance agreements. Why can't we as corporates, as responsible corporates, take the first step in implementing this by saying, I'm trusting you to do your job. These are your deliverables. Go and do them. And then manage that. Check that the person is doing it. And like you said, the New Zealand firm tried it out. Try it out with the person. See how low down you can go into your workplace. And if there's trust and there's responsible relationships, then it might well work. But if people abuse it and there aren't checks and balances, then you scrap it and you say, well, I tried, and you'll try again in another way or in a different way. But people are crying out for flexible working hours. The younger generations are fleeing the concept of the workplace. They couldn't think of anything worse. Mothers, young mothers, are trying to find ways to balance it. And what happens? You have a baby, you come back to work, you've left this child, you've cared for this child, now you're torn. What do? You end up leaving, right? Because you want to stay home and care for your child. Childcare is expensive. So we need to do things to encourage employment, and not just traditional employment, to encourage workers engaging actively and productively in the gig economy, because that's where we are. Because the way we're doing it right now, we have the number of workers getting lesser and lesser. We need that middle class. South Africa's middle class has always carried it through some of its most difficult times. And if we find ways to expand it and invite more people to participate in it, to invite multinational investment into it, you know, we as local South Africans will benefit.
Yeah, we need to reimagine how we do things.
Amen,
else we're going to get left behind in this fourth and fifth coming industrial revolution. Thank you very much for your time. That was a fascinating discussion. That was labor lawyer Sherisa Raja.